Have you ever wondered if hell is real? Well, I might have an answer for you. Follow me down the rabbit hole to hell. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the rabbit hole. I am your host, Danny, and today we are going to be talking about the hole to hell, or the Kola super deep borehole. And in fact, that's not actually the hole to hell. It's a common misconception. The German borehole is the hole to hell. But we're going to get into that. And actually, I wanted to tell you a funny story before we get started. I was starting my research for this episode, and I knew that I wanted to do like this hole to hell, trying to figure out like what the heck is going on here. And I stumbled upon another hole, and I realized that it was the wrong one. So now I'm going to have to do like a hole series where like we just talk about random holes in the ground or all over the earth and like what's actually going on there. Because the other one is mind-boggling, and I stopped doing that research. I finished this research. That's going to be for another time. I don't know if I'll do it next week. I don't know like how many holes you guys want to hear about in a short period of time, but I'm going to have that because it's going to be a really cool episode. Anyway, not that this one won't be a cool episode. This one is literally about a hole to hell. So there's that. During the space race, right? So the 50s, 60s, you got the US and the USSR, and they're just fighting over everything. And they're like, my dick's bigger than your dick, right? Because who doesn't love a good pissing contest? And the US likes to win. They did not win this whole race, but they won the race allegedly to the moon, depending on what you believe. Well, in 1958, America launched a program called Project Mohole. The goal basically was to retrieve a sample from Earth's mantle, which is a layer in the crust, by drilling to the bottom of the ocean. Well, if you don't know about the layers of the Earth, so you have the crust, right? That's what we're all standing on. Then you have the upper mantle, you have the lower mantle, then the outer core and the inner core. And there's a bunch of different workings within each of those layers of this onion, but I decided to keep it really simple. We're not going into the history of the Earth. But what I think they didn't accommodate for, or maybe they just didn't even know at the time, is just how thick each of these layers could be. So the crust is a lot thicker than they thought it was. They thought if they drilled to the bottom of the ocean, then they could get a sample from the upper mantle. That's not true, because the bottom of the ocean is still in the crust layer. And we're going to get there in a minute. So with the funds from the National Science Foundation, they began drilling off the coast of Guadalupe Island, Mexico. And I don't know why they chose Mexico versus like any part of America when it was an American funded project, but here we are. They drilled 601 feet or 183 meters into the seabed. But in 1966, the U.S. House of Representatives pulled the project due to lack of funding. Basically, they ran out of money. They're like, do we really want to drill a hole that deep? Like, what's the point? Let's just go into the outer space. And they did. Or maybe they did. They like to pretend like they did. Depends what you believe. I'm not trying to tell you what to believe. It's just up to you. In 1970, the Soviets decided it was their turn to dig the deepest hole. So they began drilling in Murmansk, Russia. So it was just outside the Norwegian border near the Barents Sea. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, all you Russian listeners. I don't speak well in other languages. I don't do well unless I can hear it said and then I can say it back and make sure I'm doing it right. I don't do well. So when I mess things up like that, well, I'm not a Russian speaker, so it looks like Murmansk. Sounds like a Russian name. They called this project Kola Super Deep Borehole. And it lasted basically from 1970 to 1994 when it ran out of money as well and eventually ended. So this Kola super deep borehole, it's not just one hole that goes straight down. It's actually one kind of main hole and then a bunch of different little holes that kind of come off of it, like offshoots, like a branch of a tree. So the deepest hole is called SG3, and that hole extends down 7.5 miles. So about a third of the way through the Baltic continental crust. So the continental crust we know now is about 25 miles thick. 25 miles thick. And they're trying to drill to get to the mantle. That's just the crust of the ocean, of the earth. That's not mantle, which is what America's goal was. That's just the crust. That's just the outer layer of this onion. Can you imagine an onion that aggressively thick? Anyway, this hole was scientists' first look at parts of the earth we basically hadn't explored yet. So the hole proved that the granite rock extended beyond 12 kilometers. And this led scientists to discover that seismic reflection results were due to metamorphic changes in the rock from intense heat and pressure, instead of what they previously thought, because they thought that basically it was a change in the rock type, which is not true. So now we know. Thanks, Russia, for digging a super deep hole. What wowed scientists the most was the biological discoveries that they made. So these discoveries came from rocks that were more than 2 billion years old. Like, these are old rocks. And the clearest evidence of life came in the form of microscopic fossils encased in organic compounds that remained surprisingly intact despite the extreme pressures and temperatures of the surrounding rock. There's a lot of things that they didn't really account for, they didn't expect to happen. Not like a theory, not a conspiracy, but like just things that weren't expected when they began drilling. So they thought that the temperatures were going to basically reach like boiling point, so 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was going to be it. That was going to be the hottest that it got, which was not true. I mean, that was true down to about 10,000 feet. After that, the temperature started to rise rapidly, and they reached 180 degrees Celsius or 356 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a drastic change from what they thought. So I'm assuming that they made their equipment able to withstand the temperatures of boiling temperature, right? So 100 degrees Celsius, but they did not accommodate for this extreme heat change of 180 degrees Celsius. That's huge. That's such a change. So that's a lot. That's a big degree of difference. Also, the rock density decreased dramatically after 14,800 feet. So this lower density paired with the high temperatures made the rocks act more like plastic than solid, and as you can imagine, made drilling near impossible. I mean, can you and I don't know what kind of plastic, if it's like hard plastic or soft plastic. I mean, there's so many different types of plastic, but I'm assuming more like a softer plastic, because if it was like a hard plastic, you can drill through that similarly to where you can drill through rock.
Did you know that over 40% of Americans have a hard time swallowing pills? So when it's time to take your vitamins, large capsules and pills are out of the question. We know that gummy vitamins exist, but they're full of sugar, they get stuck in your teeth, and they only contain a fraction of the nutrients you need. Luckily, Easy Melts has discovered the ultimate vitamin sweet spot. Vitamins that melt in your mouth, taste like a treat, and are packed with nutrients ready for absorption, all without an ounce of sugar. For a limited time, Easy Melts is giving listeners a free 3-month supply of vitamin D3 with their first purchase. To claim your free D3 vitamins, visit try.easymelts.com/spring24. That's try.melts.com/spring24. Say goodbye to the old way of taking your vitamins and say hello to the easy way. Menopausal and perimenopausal women, listen up. It's time to take control of your health and comfort, and Winona is here to help. Winona is a telemedicine company for menopause care who believes that your symptoms are real, important, and deserve to be taken seriously. And for many women, this starts with hormone replacement therapy. Winona's HRT is made with plant-based, bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic ones, so it better aligns with your body to offer relief from hot flashes, weight gain, and other uncomfortable symptoms. 80% of women who use Winona find relief within just 90 days. So, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Visit buywinona.com today to start your free visit. With free shipping and the ability to pause or cancel at any time, your path to wellness has zero obligations. Use code SPRING24 at buywinona.com for 25% off your first treatment plan. That's BYWINONA.com for 25% off. Winona, menopause care made easy.
I'm just saying that it doesn't sound ideal for drilling conditions. And that's also kind of why they stopped a little bit too, because they didn't know really what to do anymore. And as I said previously, they stopped drilling in 1992 because of these like rock issues and the temperature issues, and they didn't really know what to do. So it brought their drilling to a stop. And then in 1994, they hadn't started drilling again. They basically ran out of money at that point, and they were like, we're going to just close it. What's the point? Like, we're done. We're done. We haven't found like a good reason to keep it open. We haven't found like a solid way to get around this like rock density temperature issue. So we'll just like be done. And that's what they did. Although a lot of the samples that they got, scientists are still working on today. So it's not like it was a wasted trip to the center of the earth, even though they didn't actually go to the center of the earth. But it wasn't wasted because they still got a lot of information about our own ocean. So as deep as they went, imagine Mount Fuji on top of Mount Everest. That's the distance that they went. So they went obviously down into the ground, but if you put those two mountains on top of each other, that's how high up they went. So if you look at like the deepest part of the ocean, they went just below the deepest part of the ocean. So I don't know if like the American scientists at the time were just under the impression that the crust layer of the earth just wasn't very thick, but they were wrong. That's for sure. But we learned that. Maybe we didn't know that before. It is said that we know more about things off of our earth than we do know about things on our earth. So we know more about like the solar system and the stars and how the moons work and all that stuff than we know about the ocean and like what's underneath our crust, and that, you know, even that the density of the rocks changed and how hot it gets down there. We didn't know all that information. Now we do. Thanks, Russia. But of course, the Germans wanted to jump on this as well, because if you're going to dig a deep hole, why not? It's such a guy thing to do. I'm going to go out there and dig a deep hole. Let's see how far I can go. And actually, if you look up a picture of the Kola super deep borehole, right now it's super unimpressive because it's literally just like a cap with a bunch of nuts screwed down onto the screws, like to keep it in place. So it looks not very impressive. But if you knew that it went down 7.5 miles under the earth, like that is impressive. But just looking at pictures, like it's overgrown now. There's rubble all around it. Nobody like really took care of it. Not that they needed to, but they just really didn't care about it. They closed it up and that was it. I'm sure they didn't want people like putting stuff down the hole, but it's not a big hole. The hole was only like, I don't know, a few inches in diameter. It's not a big hole. So anyway, enter the Germans. The Germans also want to be a part of the race to the center of the earth. So they began drilling in 1990. So they're a couple years behind. And their hole they called KTB. They wanted to make sure that they drilled as vertical as possible to make it to their intended destination. So their thoughts, like, and at the time in the 1990s, they didn't have these drilling rigs like they do now that would drill for like oil and gas and stuff like that goes straight down into the earth. We didn't have all of that. And that actually, what the Germans created to do their hole helped the oil and gas industry to figure out how to do their own holes. So they wanted to take basically what the Russians were doing and modify it because the Russians had the best holes so far. And that's what they did. They did an okay job. This like vertical direct down drilling, it did work for the first 4.7 miles. The last 1 to 1.25 miles, they were off their vertical line by about 200 meters. But they did an okay job. I mean, again, this was before all the drilling rig, like straight down type equipment that's literally necessary today for our drilling. But they didn't have that. Today, the drilling rig still stands. So the Germans didn't reach the same fate as the Americans and the Russians did. The Germans still have money, or like they just never closed it down due to lack of funds. They actually turned it into a tourist attraction so people can go and check it out, right? But the conspiracy behind this, and this is where I was confused before I even got started here, is I thought that the microphone went down the Kola super deep borehole, the one in Russia. I guess that's when I did my research, that's not what I found. I found that it went down the German, the KTB. So the German hole. What happened was a Dutch artist named Lotte Givon lowered a microphone that was basically protected by thermal shielding because it's hot down there. And they knew that it was hot, down the German borehole. And the sounds it picked up is downright disturbing. It's like this deep grumbling sound. It's like, she called it like the earth moving or the earth breathing. A lot of people say it's like the sounds of hell itself. It's not great. It actually, I was listening to it because for this episode, and my dog started freaking out. So you know it's bad when the dogs are like not into it. But I could not put the recording into this podcast because I don't know like the legal ramifications of that, if there's copyright issues or what there is. The only place I found that sound was on Vimeo. So I'm going to put that link. It'll be the last link in the show notes of all the sources that I use. It'll be the last link. So you can click on it. You can go listen to it there. I didn't want to add it here because, again, I don't want to be sued for using something that's not mine. I don't know how to download it in order to even put it here. It was really convoluted. And the only place I found it was a video that she posted. Anyway, go check it out so you can hear it yourself. You can decide if we are drilling to hell or if we're just drilling a super deep hole. So in case you're curious, the Kola super deep borehole is the deepest hole ever drilled. It's the furthest down we've gone. The US did basically restart a project in Oklahoma and they drilled down 6 miles. So that's, I mean, a little bit further than the Germans did, a lot further than what they went the first time because the first time was a failure for sure. They stopped because they hit molten sulfur. So they're like, yeah, okay, we're done. But yeah, the Kola super deep borehole, I looked it up because I saw somebody commented on something somewhere that like, oh, that's not the deepest hole ever drilled. It is. I just found it, and that information will be in the show notes, as with everything. Guys, I posted an Instagram video, or an Instagram story, asking if you wanted some advice on things that I'm doing around my house to help with, just the food shortages. We're seeing the food shortages, and I thought about doing like an updated episode on that, like a podcast episode. I will be posting some videos on my Instagram about like what I'm doing around my house to help us during the food shortages, and honestly, just like have extra food. It's really good for you to grow your own food and know where your food's coming from. So I actually just did an entire episode in the fan club about GMOs. So if you're interested in the fan club, that's always the very first link in the show notes, the Patreon. Go check it out because there's different levels. If you get to the first level, you get this episode a day early with no ads. If you get the second level, you get this episode a day early with no ads, and you get a current events episode every month. And then if you get the third level, you get the current events episode, this episode, and just an extra bonus episode. And I did that episode a little bit differently than I normally do. I normally try not to give my opinions, whether I believe them or not. I try to make you think that I've believed all the episodes. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Who knows? But that episode, I gave my opinions about as much as I saw fit to give. I don't know everything about GMOs or food, but I gave my research like I typically do, and I gave my opinions on that. So it was the first episode I've ever done like that, but I kind of liked it, and I think you guys would like it too, so go check that out. You have to become a fan club member, a Patreon, in order to hear that, but it's really cool, and I really liked it. Also, if you become a Patreon, I give you a huge shout out at the end of my podcast. So, until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all later. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.